Most people that have a reactive dog are extremely stressed anytime they go anywhere. They feel like their dog is reacting, lunging, barking, but they're actually missing a key fact that you probably don't even know about, and that is the invisible line where your dog has given you signals up until that point, then they go on to full reactive mode. Today I'm going to talk about this invisible line. It's called a threshold. We'll talk about thresholds and reactive dog training and how you can use them to your advantage to actually overcome the reactivity. So let's get right into it. So what is a threshold in dog training? A threshold is actually a distance to distraction. It's the point at which, as you get closer to your dog's distraction or trigger point, they can no longer pay attention to you or keep their brain at an optimal level. They get into an aroused or excited mindset. They can't think properly. They start reacting. To be clear, there is a difference between reactivity and aggression. When a dog is reactive, they are overstimulated, overexcited. They're reacting at a certain trigger. That could be other dogs, other people, small animals. No matter the case, when they're reactive, they see that trigger and they lose it. An aggressive dog, when they see that trigger, they do become reactive, but they actually intend to go over to that trigger and do something with it, cause some kind of harm or something like that. So a little bit of distinction there. You can have a reactive dog that might not do anything when you actually get up to the trigger, but the key point here is we want to use your dog's threshold, the distance to distraction, to our advantage to help them overcome their reactivity or their aggression. And I'm going to explain exactly how we do that in just a second. All right, so we know what our dog's threshold is. What's the method that we use to overcome that reaction at the trigger point? Well, first of all, we need to have really good engagement. I'm going to put a link to a video down in the description below where I show you how to get engagement and eye contact from your dog. Once you're doing that, what you're going to do is you're going to stay outside of your dog's threshold to other triggers. So if your dog is reactive to other dogs, you want to make sure you stay 30 feet plus away. If 30 feet, give or take, is your threshold, you stay outside of the threshold for your dog's reactivity. You build up engagement. You make sure they can focus on you, do your eye contact, do your engagement, lure some obedience, have fun with your dog in a training session. Now, let's say you do this over the course of several training sessions and several days, and you feel comfortable. Now, what I want you to do is begin closing your threshold. So if you were just outside of 30 feet from that trigger point, that other dog, now it's time to get within 30 feet. So I want you to get closer and closer. And once you start to notice your dog can no longer pay attention to you, that is your new threshold. So let's say you started at 30 feet, now you're at 20 feet, and you begin to notice your dog can't pay attention to you. As you get closer than 20 feet from the trigger, you're going to stay outside of 20 feet, do your engagement, do your eye contact, enhance your relationship with your dog. Do that for several sessions, several days, depending on your dog is depending on how long this is actually going to take you. And then once you feel comfortable at that 20-foot mark, you're again going to move to close that threshold. So get within 20 feet, find your new threshold. Maybe it's 10 feet, for example. Again, as you get closer to the trigger and you notice that your dog can no longer focus on you, no longer pay attention, it starts to get too aroused, too excited, then you hover outside of that new threshold and you do your training, your engagement, your eye contact, your obedience, your luring, having fun in your training sessions outside of your new threshold, and you slowly but surely close the gap to where your threshold is as close as possible to that trigger point, maybe even completely gone to where your dog no longer reacts to the trigger. Now that sounds all great and dandy, right? But what happens if you have a reaction while you're working on this process? It will happen. We're not in a perfect situation, right? We're working in our neighborhood, a dog pops up out of nowhere, or a dog, off-leash dog maybe shows up. You never know what's going to happen. So let's say our dog does have a reaction while we're working on these thresholds. Your first step is to get outside of the threshold, right? So let's say I'm working at that 20-foot mark, give or take, then all of a sudden my trigger moves to me. Now it's closer than 20 feet. My dog starts to get aroused. It starts to get reactive. I need to back out. I need to exfil, get out of that situation, increase the threshold. Why? Because what our dog practices is what they will continue to do, and we need to try and prevent reactions while we're developing our threshold reduction. Let's say, for example, you have a dog that turns and bites the leash or tries to bite the closest thing to it as it feels pressure on that leash. What that means is you need to be careful with your leash handling, be prepared to hold the leash away from your body so the dog can't get to you. And you also want to make sure that your eye contact, engagement, and obedience sessions also include some leash pressure training in them. Again, I'll put a video to leash pressure training down in the description below so you can watch that as well, and make sure you incorporate that in your training plan as you're reducing your thresholds. But if there's a reaction, increase the threshold, increase the distance, get away so your dog can calm down, then go right back into your eye contact and engagement. Now, as you're progressing with your eye contact, your engagement, your obedience training, you need to make sure that you're prepared and that you have in your overall training strategy that you're going to teach your dog corrections, which means that's going to be how we help our dog understand what behaviors are good to do and what behaviors are not allowed to do, right? So reactions in the future, if there is a reaction, we want to be able to correct them if they start getting reactive and they respond to that by calming down. That's our end goal, right? So we need to make sure that teaching corrections are part of our long-term training strategy. But with that being said, there are some tools we're going to need to help us achieve this. So number one, you need to make sure you have a great training collar. I personally recommend a Fur Saver training collar, and I have links to that down in the description below. Two, you want to make sure you have a great leash. I prefer 6-foot leather leashes. I've got links to that in the comments in the description down below as well. But if you have a dog that has a habit of turning around and chewing through a leash real quick, you'll want a steel chain leash until you can reduce their threshold and get rid of that reactivity. Then you can move to a leather leash. You always want to make sure you have food rewards so you can reward your dog for doing the right thing. And I hold those food rewards myself in a bait bag around my waist, which I have the bait bag that I like in the link in the description below as well for you to check out, all on Amazon. And as training progresses, right, we need to make sure dogs understand the corrections, which is going to start off as a tug and release on the leash. And then we'll move to e-collar work, right? E-collar conditioning, e-collar corrections. E-collar is basically going to be your invisible leash. We have to teach that process. I'm going to put a link to our e-collar tutorial on how to train your dog and condition your dog to the e-collar. I'll put a link to that down in the description below as well. But these are the things you need to think about as you're working on this. At some point in your training strategy, you have to incorporate corrections. That way, if your dog does react, does get aroused, we can communicate with them through the correction that behavior is not tolerated, and your dog should, boom, immediately return to eye contact, engagement, and whatever obedience you were doing at the time. Just keep in mind, you could have all these tools at your disposal. They're not going to do you any good if you're not focused on your threshold. You have to make your threshold training your priority as you're helping your reactive dog. So as we're reducing our thresholds, one of the main things we want to start seeing happen is called counter conditioning and desensitization. We want our dog to have an automatic response if they see the trigger. And my preference is to have the dog just check in with me if they see a trigger, right? You want your dog's conditioned response to be pay attention to me instead of paying attention to that trigger. That's part of counter conditioning, right? So if my dog previously used to react at the trigger, but now they turn to look at me, that's the counter conditioning piece. That's what this whole threshold training process is going to be, and that's why you have to prioritize engagement and eye contact as you're reducing your thresholds. Desensitization is going to be helping our dog learn to ignore distractions and triggers that are around them. So if they see another dog, instead of getting aroused, they begin to just be neutral or give you eye contact. Both are going to be accomplished if you follow the process that I'm outlining today. One thing you need to pay attention to when you're doing your reactive dog threshold training is going to be paying attention to the little signals and cues your dog is giving you through their native language, which is their body language. The whole time you're doing this process, they're telling you little things along the way you need to pick up on so you can adjust what you're doing. And I've made a full video teaching you how to read your dog's body language. I'm going to put that video right here, and I'll show you exactly what you need to be paying attention to so you can be successful in overcoming your dog's reactivity.